really busy. So the question is, every policy, those who want to the high-level commitment and put the Prime Minister as a chair, and that policy, we are very rich to make a policy, but we are very poor to implement the policy. So, and the second question, the second is, sometimes the policy is not, sometimes the policy is not prepared by the needs of the country. I'm sorry to say, sometimes the policy will come as the interest of the donors, as the interest of the development partners, or as the interest of the bilateral, multilateral, any donors. Donors come to our, okay, I'm ready to support of this, but you need to, this policy, or you need to change this policy. Because the policy are guidance, not at the national interest, sometimes they're guided by the donor and development partners. The major problem in the policy, yes, in the policy there will be the mechanism of the implementation, but that policy, that mechanism will never develop. So, yes, we have the policy, but the many policies are not implemented. Even the policy, why you are making policy, just making the policy for policy. That is my observation of the policy. But the legislation, yes, of course, we may have all of the legislation, especially if we talk about the adaptation, maybe many countries have the Forest Act, Environmental Protection Act, Energy Act, Water Act, Health. There are a lot of legislation. And then this legislation also, when we have the legislation, because the legislation is a lengthy process, it is very difficult to get the legislation. It is a time-taking process. Sometimes we have the legislation, it is very difficult to update and revise, because you have to see your political situation, you have to see your, then, because once a legislation came, then it is difficult to update and revise. But the mechanism of that implementation of this legislation is still in the very poor stage, because the because we have the very low mechanism, monitoring mechanism in the legislation. And sometimes the implementation of this legislation is very weak, because if you are not the implementation framework or mechanism, even central level to the grassroots level, sometimes we are very weakened. So we are observed to the very weak part of this implementation. Come to the talking about the legislation. Yes, we have. Talking about the regulation, we may have the many regulations, because if you have the legislation, then the act has provide the right to make regulations, so that. Yes, we have the many regulations. Even sometimes the regulation is overruled by the letter of circulation, I think. And also in the regulation, the monitoring part is very weak, very weak. And after that, come to the guidelines. Many countries have they issue the guidelines for special in order to implement the effectiveness of the project or plan or programs. So sometimes it's called guidelines, sometimes you can share the approach paper, sometimes you can share the roadmap, or these are, maybe the NAPA could be the one guidelines, or maybe some of you have the donor harmonizing or something in the something in the climate change. We have the many guidelines in the energy, water sector, forest, and agriculture, and there are so many regulations. Still, the problem is the same. It is not well implemented. So that sometimes, and if it doesn't work, policy, legislation, regulation, guidelines doesn't work, then it comes to the government case-by-case decision, the cabinet decision. So that it comes to be the take decision. The guideline, sometimes the guideline also prepare at the ministry level. There is a problem with the coordination to the other ministry as well. So if I summarize these 4 issues, then I found the coordination problem within the ministry, within the line ministry, or other stakeholders is a major problem to implement the policies, legislation, guidelines, and others. And there is the information gaps sometimes, because of there are different line ministries. Maybe if, for example, the National Planning Commission, the Ministry of Finance, then after the donors, then after if we talk about the climate change, mostly in the generally the Ministry of Environment is the focal minister of the, to look after the climate change issue. Sometimes it is the problem to the coordination with the Ministry of Environment or National Planning Commission or Ministry of Finance, because mostly the financial case will be handled by the Ministry of Finance. But some of the, and then in the climate change issue, due to the information gaps, because the two line ministries are not in the same board. And again, just the next gaps is that's the implementation mechanism. Then also sometimes the resource country in the implementation is not clear, because and then the most challenges about in the adaptation, how to channel the resources to the grassroots level or vulnerable community. Actually, all we are talking about the climate change, actually we are mainly the impacted person or the vulnerable community is in the grassroots level. How to channel the resources, how to send in more resources. For example, now we are just approved our NAPA from the cabinet. We have developed an implementation framework, and we decide 80% any of the climate change project money the total project out of the 80% of the money should go to the grassroots level. Minimum 80%. This is our requirement. If less than 80%, we are not going to implement the project. Sometimes it goes to the 90%, because these 20%, 10% and 10%, 10% for the central level coordination, 10% is the regional level coordination, 80% should go to the grassroots level. If there is no need to the regional level coordination, then it might be the 90%. So any project of the climate change is more than 80%, more than 80% of the resources should go to the grassroots level. That is our thinking. And we are coordinating the project. And always the donor won't comment that everything is ready, but generally question asks again to you have no capacity. You have no capacity. How to implement the project? We have to justify. Then sometimes I said that, who are you to ask my capacity? But in the name of our capacity or the weak capacity, generally again, the development partners, the donors, they want the more TA than their parts, rather than to capacity at the government service. So it should be limit up to how much TA is approved in the climate change project. So TA is not bad thing, but more TA is not good thing, especially a country like ours. So and lastly, my observation at the implementation framework, I'm not seeing any constraint to implement the project in the climate change, either policy or regulations or guidelines. But if you try to develop these policy, guidelines, regulation, and then if you go into project, it will be very late. It will be very late. So as and when necessary, you have to address this policy, these guidelines, this act, but firstly, you have to develop simple implementation framework, implementation mechanism, agree to the donor, agree to the development partner, and then go to directly to the people, because people are really suffering, and as possible, resources should go to address of their problem. With this remark, thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Gimere. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your problems in Nepal, and for provoking us even further. May I now give the floor to the next speaker. He is Dr. Daisuke Sano, Deputy Director of the Natural Resources Management Group, IGES, Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, Japan. Dr. Sano is currently engaged in research on climate change adaptation in the agricultural water sector and biofuel utilization for sustainable development. He is an agricultural economist and has been working on topics such as commodity trade issues under trade agreement, economic analysis of water treatment facilities, and environmental impacts of economic integration on the agricultural sector in Asia, with a special focus on organic agriculture. His research interests include adaptation, sustainable agriculture under climate change, and/or trade liberalization and certification systems for greener products. Dr. Sano, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you for a nice introduction, and good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. So many things are already said and done, maybe more said. So I'd like to make some few points responding to the provocateurs in very provocative points. And I don't know I can respond to fully, but I'd like to touch upon it. And the first thing is the legality, or it was a very interesting question from the lawyer, because this is a very interesting way of looking at. But in order to respond to the first question, I think from the researcher's point of view, I think there's a general consensus that there's no single silver bullet regulations which deals with adaptation. So adaptation requires many kind of policies or measures, including like regulation, which is a command and control type measures, also non-command and control measures, or more soft measures, information-based measures, or market-based measures. So we are looking at this kind of combination of good set of policy mix. So that is the way to go. And in my opinion, the strength of adaptation is this adaptive kind of way of thinking. So it doesn't have to be strictly legal in a framework. Of course, if it's necessary, we have to have some legal framework. But at the same time, community level endeavor, community level awareness raising, it doesn't have to be regulation. So it's more information, more soft measures. So I like to add, so some kind of set of the policies will be very effective. And after that, one thing I like to comment is now, so how we know these measures or policies or regulations are effective. So we need to know, we may need to know some indicators or metrics, because some people say, oh, this policy works pretty well, but other people may not know that. So we need to know how to measure the effectiveness of the policy so that we can have better discussion at the policy decision-making stage, and also maybe equally importantly, the fund availability is rising because more opportunities is there. So in order to get donors' attention, someone can say, okay, we have a good policies with measures, and we know how to measure this effectiveness. So please assist this particular project or particular effort. So having some sort of indicators to measure the effectiveness will be very good tool to formulate policies. So this is, of course, indicator is not a policy itself, but it's a good, important component to formulate policies. That's my second point I like to make. And then the third point is, okay, we suppose we have a good set of policies, very effective, and we know how to measure it. But the question is how to make decision making on this, because if countries are rich or communities are very rich in fund, maybe these countries may be able to implement all the policies they can think of. But the reality is the resources are very limited. So we need to make prioritize, which one of the comment Ms. Hassan made. So how to make prioritize, or in other words, how to mainstream these important measures. So this still, I don't have a clear answer, but this is some sort of research institute should be engaged in. So what kind of decision-making process would be more effective? It could be multi-criteria analysis, maybe applied, but in order to communicate with policymakers, we need to have some clear message. Okay, this is the way, maybe perhaps effectively we can make some decisions. So the third point I'm trying to make here is the regulatory system is important, but in addition to that, how to make this decision more effectively and quickly. And the last point is I cannot agree more about the importance of the capacity development of capacity. And it's been already pointed out that some countries, or in many cases, there are nice-looking, nice grand blueprint on a paper. but often the case, the implementation capacity is very lacking. It's very unfortunate. So in order to tackle this problem, I think we really need to think about how to develop capacity to implement this, including how to manage fund, which is Ms. Hassan pointed out. Funding